Welcome back to Chat Shit. Round 3 is finished, and this round I think saw some teams contending for finals take care of business. And then we had a huge double header on Saturday night. Hawthorn versus GWS and Brisbane versus Geelong, who, as we were saying last week, might be the best 4 teams in it. And then we thought the game of the round was Friday night, Carlton versus Bulldogs.
Well, the Dogs pulled off a gutsy comeback win to beat Carlton by just 8 points after trailing the entire night. I mean, Aaron Norton looked completely lost out there. 4 disposals, but then clutch goal and assist at the end that ended up winning them the game. Sam Darcy versus Wiedering looked like a heavyweight battle.
Sam Darcy is the best player of all time.
Even this early, Sam Darcy and going head to head with Wiedering, they were back and forth. There were free kicks going both ways. They were going at each other. Darcy was shot down early, but kicked 2 really important goals to probably turn the tide in the game. Brody Kemp sticking forward, career best, 5 goals, big moments, 3rd and 4th. I think he was worth a mention. Matt Kennedy comes back and haunts Carlton, something they could probably use. His grunt in the midfield, 22 disposals, 9 clearances, 2 massive goals in that game. I mean, Carlton now 0-3. And just to mention a few guys, Sam Davidson, the mature age recruit for the Western Bulldogs, had an awesome game.
Yeah.
He looked so composed. He's still young, but for his 3rd game in AFL Footy, looked like he's been out there for about 100 games.
Yeah.
And Liberatore just keeps doing what Liberatore does.
Yeah, and the Bulldogs just absolutely needed this win. As we always say, they're always just around the finals mark, and they need to be winning games like this if they want to make a serious charge this year. But the big story out of this will be Carlton. 0-3 with their list. It's not acceptable to the fans or to the players, and so there's going to be some real introspection going on in Carlton over the next week.
I mean, something that the Bulldogs have struggled with a lot is notching up those early wins. Those wins you just get so you can relax, or when there's the struggle during winter and the games come thick and fast, you bank those wins early, and that's what they haven't done. They've almost played catch up in the previous season, so it's really good to see them getting some wins early on the board.
Absolutely. And we're going to jump straight into the Footy Pyramid. So the best 15 players according to Aiden.
Based on form and vibes. Now, I've decided we're going to be cutthroat this week. If you haven't played well this season, you've now had 3 games to prove it. All right? 4 outs this week. That's more than we've ever had. Christian Petrarca is out of the pyramid. He's not a top 15 player in the competition. Sicily's just going to get edged out here. Didn't have his best game. Jeremy Cameron is out of the pyramid. There's been a lot better key forwards. Didn't have a great game against Brisbane at all. And Max Gawn is going to drop out of the pyramid. He's probably maybe 3rd best ruckman. Tom de Koning. People claim Lloyd Meek's the best ruckman. And Sherry looks like he's going to be the new guard.
Gawn's not had his best couple of games.
He hasn't had his best couple of games. So there's 4 outs, which means there's 4 ins. We're going to start from the bottom. Nick Larkey is going to enter the pyramid. He's going to get a lot more service this year in a North Melbourne team we're probably going to discuss a little bit later.
Leading the Coleman race early.
Leading the Coleman race, and looks to be a massive threat. One of the best kicks at goal, if not the best kick at goal in the competition. Looks incredibly composed. Tristan Sherry's going to hold his spot. Struggled today, but he looked like he was carrying an injury. Or picked one up early in the game. Was holding his hamstring all game and still had an alright game. Sarong's going to hold his spot. Yes. He got a lot of touches today, a lot of clangers, gave the ball away a lot. Didn't have a tag. You'd probably expect him to fly against West Coast. Will Day's going to hold his spot. And I'm going to bring Jack McRae into the pyramid. You wouldn't expect him to maybe be a top 15 player in the competition, but if you just look at the past 3 weeks and the numbers he's putting up, I think he absolutely deserves it.
I think it's so deserved. And it's not just numbers. He works his absolute bum off, and he just wins the ball cleanly, gets tackles, runs the other way as well, and he's effective with the ball as well. He's getting involved in a lot of scores and goals.
And my thing is, he's always got those easy disposals. He gets the ball, he hand passes it off, but he's getting contested possessions, like you said, tackles going both ways. So I think he deserved to enter the pyramid. Which means there's guys that are entering the pyramid above row number 5, going to row number 4. Lachie Neale is just going to hold his spot. Didn't have his best game this week. Isaac Rankin is going to enter the pyramid for his first time this year in the 4th tier. Finn Callahan's going to move down 2 tiers. He struggled against Hawthorn in a massive game where you really want a guy like him to stand up.
Copped the tag, didn't deal with it too well.
Struggled, and he's going to cop the tag if it shows that he can't deal with it. And Isaac Heaney is just going to hold his spot in the bye. Moving up into the third tier, which means there's a new player that's going to enter the pyramid in the third tier. We're going to get there in a second. Sam Taylor's going to move up. I know they lost. He had a decent game. Best key defender in the competition. Patrick Cripps is going to move down. Didn't have a great game. I know he got injured late, but before that, he just didn't have any impact in that game, in a must-win game against the Bulldogs. Tom Liberatore is going to enter the pyramid in the third tier, which is unseen. So that's, for me, that's a top 6 player in the competition right now. Week in, week out, he's the new captain with Bontempelli out. Gets huge numbers. He's a guy you'd want to die for.
I reckon it's probably been 5 or 6 straight years that you just think, oh, Tom Liberatore, he's the kind of guy that's a bit past his peak. He'll probably slow down this year. And I reckon he's gotten better every year over the past 5 or 6. Probably pretty unfair that he hasn't had an All-Australian, and I would not be surprised if this is the year.
I mean, he's absolutely flying so far. And you know what? 3 games, we've now got a decent sample size. That's why a lot of players are out, a lot of players have come in. Which means we have 2 new entrants, not new entrants to the pyramid, but 2 guys who have risen to row number 2. Noah Anderson is now, I think, a top 3 player on form in the competition. The Gold Coast look like they're going to be a team to beat. They have a massive game against Adelaide next week, which is going to be a huge test. But he just puts up massive numbers.
Every week.
Always kicks his goal, gets a huge amount of disposals, and it's all impact. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just little handballs. He's all impact. And Zach Merritt is gonna move up to the second tier.
Help.
He did get some help this week, which we're going to discuss in our next segment in top 5 players of the round. And Dacos is on top of the pyramid on the bye. I don't think anyone deserves to be above him just yet.
Very, very good. That was some really quick talking. So maybe you were playing that at 0.75 speed or something. But we'll move on now to our top 5 players of the round. Starting out the top 5 players of the round, you just mentioned Noah Anderson, who's putting up huge numbers, but his teammate, Touk Miller, is playing a different role this round.
Funny that.
I have no clue why you laughed. Oh, you've got him in the same spot?
I've got him at number 5 as well.
Oh, no way. There were a lot. I didn't think it was too obvious this week.
No. It was really tough to put players this week. And, I mean, his stat line probably deserves to put him higher, but I've just said against Richmond.
Yeah, but Touk Miller, with Gold Coast trying to change things up to see what can make them a finals team, he's been pushed to half forward. And he's given the captaincy to Noah Anderson. He's just handed it over. But the role that he's playing is amazing. The pressure, the ball-winning ability in the front half, and he's converting his goals.
Yeah, I like an item at number 5, going to number 4.
My number 4 is Tom Liberatore, who you've just mentioned. Just an absolute bull. Got his team across the line, I think it's fair to say. Like, if you just read out his stats, it's a goal, 30 touches with 11 tackles, getting 5 clearances, winning 3 free kicks in amongst the contest to get the ball forward. But it's just his work rate and how tough he is in the contest that is pretty much unmatched in the competition right now.
I like it. I'm going to talk about him just a little bit later. My number 5, Nick Watson. He is going to be very, very, very good. Nick the Wizard Watson. He's more than just a small forward who plays inside 50 and picks up the scraps. He got up the ground, 21 disposals at 85%, 11 contested possessions, 9 score involvements. I mean, that's not a guy you saw being able to do that last season, especially the first couple of games this season where he did struggle. So just awesome performance from him in a massive game where he stood up.
And from a Hawthorn perspective, they have probably the best set of small forwards in the competition.
I think comfortably.
Yeah, and when you look at all their small forwards, all of them can push up and play pretty much a wing half-forward role where they all can help win the ball, which is Dylan Moore, Jack Ginnivan, Nick Watson, Connor McDonald when he's fit.
Yeah.
All these guys can get you 20 disposals a game if you want to let them, and they can also kick you 3 goals a game. So what a forward line they have. My number 3, and this is a player that you wouldn't have considered, but I thought he was by far the best on ground in the Adelaide game, and that's Mitch Hinge.
Oh, the commentators were raving about him all game.
And so was I at home.
I didn't have him.
Mitch Hinge has been a very much underappreciated player. This might be the first time we've mentioned him on this podcast.
I definitely guarantee you that,
Yeah, and he is just... I think it's the fact that Adelaide haven't been competing, so he doesn't get noticed. He's the kind of guy that now that Adelaide are in the fray, he will be noticed, and he is one of the best intercept players in the competition and was just on fire tonight and quashed a lot of North Melbourne attacks.
See, I really like that because you highlight Mitch Hinge. I think in the first round one, I highlighted Josh Worrell of Adelaide Defence. And then one of my hits a few weeks ago was the Adelaide Defence. So it's good that they're finally being recognised.
Yep.
My number 3 was Liberatore, who you talked about already. But yeah, just the captain you want to play for, always the hottest guy working on the ground.
Absolutely. Don't like the Simpsons tattoo, though. At number 2, I've got Matt Rowell. So another Gold Coast midfielder. I think this sort of reflects how dominant that Gold Coast midfield was today. Against a Melbourne midfield that has won a premiership. This Gold Coast midfield, and specifically Matt Rowell, he was unstoppable inside. 19 contested possessions against the likes of Oliver, Viney, Petrarca, and 36 touches. So that's 13 clearances in those contests as well. He really couldn't be stopped.
I like it. I've tried to limit myself picking Gold Coast players. I think last season I tried not to pick players that play against Richmond, so I'm just going to go with the one, Tuke Miller. But yeah, his stat line in any other game is absolutely insane.
Comparing Melbourne to Richmond is a bit crazy. But
yeah, you know what? There were just too many. I could have picked half of the Gold Coast team based on what the numbers they put up. I had Sam Durham at number 2. I think Essendon have been missing his fight early in the season. Merritt has some help. Last week we called. Merritt needs help. He got help this game. A few guys in the midfield stood up. He had 14 contested possessions, 12 score involvements. He was everywhere.
Yeah.
So was Merritt, and it was a big part in why they won that game.
I like that pick, and I'm going to assume we have the same number 1 because I was texting you obsessively about this performance. It was Jack Sinclair, who I think was the best player of the round.
Don't.
Oh, really?
No, we don't.
I'm Jack Sinclair, and I thought, I don't know what his stats were. I can get them up on my phone right now. But he was just a different level against Richmond today. I know it wasn't the best opposition, but this was not just a 40 touches. This was 40 touches of just pure class. There's a reason he was an All-Australian a couple of years ago. He's got a bit of a role as a hybrid defender and midfielder for St Kilda this year. And he was just phenomenal, just picking out kicks that you wouldn't see, just on a pinhead, constantly, all game. 28 kicks and 12 handballs, went at 85%. So he was amazing.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is didn't have him in the top 5 because it's against Richmond, but that's just me. His game was incredible. And there was a time when the game was a little bit hanging in the balance, and he was definitely the standout player. My number 1, I'm so surprised you didn't have him. I don't know if you caught the games on Saturday night between Brisbane and Geelong, but Will Ashcroft was the cleanest player on the ground. And it was a wet, competitive fixture between 2 heavyweights in this competition.
To cut me some slack, the 2 best games of the round were at the exact same time.
This is very true.
And I was very interested in the Hawthorn GWS game because I didn't want to miss. I said at the start of the year I'm not missing a Hawthorn game this year, so I didn't get to catch much of that game.
That's fair, but in this game, to be so clean with the ball in this sort of fixture, 30 disposals, 17 contested possessions, a number of clearances. He was a massive part why Brisbane won. Lachie Neale didn't have his best game, and he really stood up in a game that was really tough to control.
Yep, I absolutely love it. The Norm Smith medalist, the youngest ever, getting it done the following season. So now we're going to jump into our hits and misses for the round.
My hit for this week is just the bottom half teams from last year looking to compete for finals this year. And we had a little discussion earlier today about it. But North, 2024, they finished 17th. They're in the fight. They might not get there, but they could get close. They've got the team to do it. Adelaide, 2024, 15th. Could be a top 4 team this year. Massive game against Gold Coast next week. Tough fixtures coming up. Gold Coast, 2024, finished 13th. Should and most definitely should play finals. Wouldn't be surprised if they got in the top 4. With the list that they have, They really should be up there.
With the pickups they have, the players just all that they already had going into their peak, they really should be making finals, and there's no reason they're not a genuine contender this year.
Those are the main 3 that I saw, and I've just put St Kilda here. They finished 12th. Maybe they finish around there again, but they've started the season in a bit better form than what I expected them to be.
I'm going to assume that your miss is about the other teams and the opposite.
No, it's not. It's not.
Because along with that comes the teams that have been replaced by them. Teams like Melbourne didn't play well last year, but they've had a big drop-off, and Port Adelaide maybe.
Carlton.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So finals teams that have dropped off. But my hit is one of those teams, Gold Coast. So just to focus in on them, finally making a genuine finals charge. I said to Aiden during the weekend, during the Gold Coast game, just how their players were dismantling Melbourne if they don't make finals this year, there needs to be an investigation into club-wide match fixing within the coaching or the players. I don't know.
I think one of us said just throw them up the competition if they can't make finals this year.
If you have this list, I don't know how they have one of the most talented lists, depth-wise and top-end talent-wise, out of the 18 in the comp. If you have Noah Anderson, Tuke Miller, and Matt Rowell all in their primes, one of the better ruckmen in the comp, maybe the best set of key backs going around with Charlie Ballard, Sam Collins, Mac Andrew, who will also go forward.
Ballard out, though, for
the
season.
True. But Ben King as a Coleman medal contender up forward.
Yeah.
Now adding Rioli to go along with Sam Flanders and now John Noble in the outside game. They have literally it all, and they're going to make finals this year if nothing goes wrong.
It's just they don't have that social media rep. If this was the exact same list on a team like Collingwood, you'd probably predict them first. I'm not even kidding. That sort of list that they have. Top 4 at bare minimum.
But right? I guess you can have the players, but it's the team that's more than the sum of the parts. So a team like Hawthorn, we know the style that they play and the identity that they have is going to win games, and same as GWS and Sydney when they're fit, and maybe Gold Coast don't have that yet. And so that's the difference.
Yeah, and they have to make finals. I mean, it's now or never. Otherwise, let's just throw them out, bring Tasmania in, and get on with it.
They really do.
Anyways, my miss, we discussed it a bit in the podcast last year, but not penalising ducking more. Yeah. It is so frustrating when I understand if the umpire sees you ducking, that's your prior gone and you get holding the ball. But let's be honest, right? We very rarely see a player duck and then holding the ball given. More often than not, it's the high tackle. But I've watched several games this weekend. There were quite a few in the Adelaide game recently today where there were several bought free kicks. I get that it's tough to see in a game at high speed. I feel for the umpires, right? Where a player slightly ducks, they see a tight angle when there's loads of bodies around, play gets caught high. But I think start finding players. Yeah. Right? Let's look at it in match review after. And if you see a player has deliberately dropped his knees to win a free kick, fine him. Yeah. Because driven with the head. Yeah, 100%. And I feel I'm not blaming the umpires here. It is a very hard game to officiate at the speed and the amount of bodies around the ball. But in post-match, you can see everything. Commentators are always say, oh, he's just ducked and he's won that foul. He's bought that free kick. Right? Start penalising them. You're encouraging these players. Yep. We discussed it. You were big on it last year, encouraging these players to try and win the free kick because holding the ball is never called.
I wouldn't go as far as to say the fine, but what I'd say is I think it's fair to say the umpires can identify it because when they had this technically this crackdown on it about 2 years ago, for about a 2 to 4 week period, the umpires were calling ducks as free kicks against, or just not calling it if the player with the ball induced the head-high contact. But suddenly, it's just faded out, and I don't see any reason why. I think that maybe it's been some really harmful commentary on it. Like, I think these commentators that talk about, oh, you've got to be protecting the head. I think that ruling really harshly on ducks is protecting the players' heads because it stops encouraging these players from throwing their head into the tackles and throwing their head into danger. You know what? I don't even hate the idea of fines because it's probably.
I just don't know how else you can possibly do it because it's such a fast-paced game. If they don't see it, it just becomes more of a grey area. Yeah. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to choose what to do with it.
It's my least favorite thing in the game right now because in the contest, if you've got a shorter player, your Dacos's, Sarongs, Errol Gouldens, who are winning the ball down low, you may as well not try tackle them. And that's what we see players sometimes do. They're not for them to get up. They're not going in hard or they're just letting them get the disposal away because if you go for that tackle, there's just no way that they're not those players are so crafty at making you head high tackle.
They drive into the arm. You'll put your arm there to tackle, and they'll make sure it hits their neck. Yeah. But let's move on. What's your miss?
My miss for this week is Melbourne. I've talked about the flip side of that game, talking up Gold Coast, but Melbourne were pretty uncompetitive, and it's the second week that they've been uncompetitive against a team that was not really close to finals last year. North last week, and now Gold Coast this week. Huge losses by 59 and 58. So the Melbourne team that was competing for premierships is well and truly gone. They're entering a rebuild now, and we're seeing that the players that have been dominating the league for a few years, Clayton Oliver, Petrarca, Gawn, maybe Stephen May and Viney, they're not dominating anymore. And Melbourne have actually, with their famous midfield, have been by far the worst midfield team, according to the advanced metrics. Worst differential in terms of clearances, worst differential in terms of contested possessions. They well behind it now, and they could finish quite low this year.
I mean, when you build your game on contest and defense and you're getting smashed up and all of that, and your forward line's probably the worst or one of the worst in the competition, I mean, it's looking pretty bleak for them.
Mm-hmm. So we can probably move on now to our one-time segment for this week, which is talking about the best veterans going around in the comp.
Which is our top 5 players over 32 years old. I'll kick us off straight into it. Number 5, McGovern. Right, I'll go on. Number 4, I have Zorko. Number 3, I have Liberatore. Number 2, I have Max Gawn. And number 1, I have Tom Stewart.
Okay,
well, my top 5 veterans in the competition.
This feels like a waste of time because I've got the same 5 players as you, but I'll focus on my top 2, which I have Jeremy McGovern as the best veteran in the comp. I think he's maybe he's on West Coast, so he doesn't get the same recognition that he'd get, but if he played the way that he played at a contending team right now, he's as good as he was when he dominated in the West Coast Premiership, All-Australian last season for good reason. And I think he's the best veteran going around.
Okay, I like it. Well, we'll move on straight into the power rankings.
Starting us off at the bottom, staying in the same positions as last week are West Coast and Richmond. Both relatively uncompetitive this week, but I've seen more from Richmond in terms of that first win. They've got one on the board at least, which West Coast don't. Next up, Melbourne and Carlton. So Carlton stay where they were, but Melbourne move way down.
4 spots.
Yeah, and they moved down 5 spots the previous week. So I was hopeful about them after round 1. I thought that they were really competitive in that round 1 match, but we have not seen that again. There seems to be a lot of dipping of the head in that game, just to go on from what I said about a minute ago. Next up, in 14th and 13th, we have 2 teams that played a very good game this week, which hasn't been talked about much yet. Essendon and Port Adelaide. Even though Essendon won, I've got them just below here because I think this was a win off pure necessity. They just needed to get it done, and I think Port Adelaide have a better chance of actually making a charge towards finals. Okay, and then in number 12, we've got St Kilda, and they're making strides in these power rankings by taking care of business well and truly in back-to-back weeks. So yes, they haven't played the strongest opposition this week, but last week, huge upset against Geelong, and they've backed it up with a really strong performance this week. North Melbourne sit in 11th. I believe that means they moved down a spot from last week, and I think that that's fair. They were not awful this week. As the commentator said in the 4th quarter, they're staying competitive in games that they previously would be sort of destroyed in previous years. Adelaide are probably a contender this year, and North Melbourne did okay in that game at Adelaide Oval. Next up is Fremantle, and I know that they are 1 and 2, but I still believe in their list. They finally got that win on the board that they really needed against West Coast and got it in comfortable fashion. And yeah, as I said, I really do believe in the strength of this list, and I know Justin Longmire is not getting the most out of this team so far, but this list just has to be contending for finals at the very least. Next up is the Bulldogs in 9th, who got a great win, but I think that those other teams that were around those power rankings last week, as you can see next to this, also performed. And they've jumped up a couple of spots, because you'll see that Collingwood and Sydney, who had the bye, have dropped 2 places each. Because, unfortunately, while they were resting up, Gold Coast and Adelaide both had absolutely fantastic performances.
Yeah, and they move up a significant amount of spots.
Yeah. So Adelaide moves up a significant amount of spots. Gold Coast moves up 2, is it?
Yeah.
And yeah, so these are 2 teams who we're yet to see them be tested by a proper contender, but they haven't taken a step wrong
does it
left.
count when they play each other next week?
That is an absolutely amazing game that we're looking forward to. That might set the men apart from the boys, see who's really contending here, if that's a blowout. But yeah, they have not taken a foot wrong yet. We're just so excited to see those games against Sydney, Collingwood, and these top 4 teams that I haven't said yet. Those will be great games. 4th is Geelong. So the top 4 stay the same. So these 2 teams played against each other this week, Brisbane and Geelong, and Brisbane just got it done. And then I had Hawthorn and GWS at 1 and 2, and Hawthorn just got it done. So I think it's fair to keep those rankings the same here. I think that those are the 4 teams to beat at the moment. And this is where the power rankings sit as the teams start to sort of settle in place.
Okay. Let us know what you think of the power rankings, any segments you want to see. Supercoach code has been right up there the entire video. You can join us, your points will come across. We want to see you there, and we'll see you all on the next one.